Hello and welcome to this edition of EMS Now Up Close. I'm Eric with EMS Now, and today my pleasure to speak with Andy Barnett. He's Vice President of Business Development with Freedom Global. Freedom Global, of course, is a global independent component distributor that we've had the pleasure of interviewing before. Actually, Andy, I spoke to you before, but it was a joint interview with you
It
and
was.
and so this time we get just you alone.
Your lucky day.
Yeah. So listen, why don't you begin by giving, maybe introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. So I'm Andy Barnett, as Eric mentioned, Vice President of Business Development. I just celebrated my 1 year anniversary with Freedom a week ago. Prior to that, I spent 16 years in franchise distribution with Aero Electronics. My last role, I was area sales director of the Mid-Atlantic and Southeast, which was 11 states and 6 branches, and was Aero's largest region in the United States. So electronic distribution flows through this blood daily.
Okay. Good to know. Good to know. Listen, I wanted to talk to you about several things because it's an interesting time in the industry, but let's start with the kind of the aerospace and defense side, which is a really important market for the EMS, industry, obviously. You recently attended the AUSA trade show down there in DC. Tell me kind of some of the trends that you saw, both product level and maybe even macro level.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I've done a lot of trade shows, but this was my first time going to AUSA, and it definitely lived up to the hype, right? And you touched on Andy, right? It's You look at our industry in general, and it's always cyclical, and the vertical markets follow that cyclicality normally. What's unique about the A&D space is that it doesn't, right? It's always of extreme importance because it comes down to national security and keeping our borders secure, and whether it's the United States, but every country is focused on the defense spending. So, when you're talking about a $2.7 trillion industry in that vertical, of which, they spend, the numbers I saw for 24 were 178 billion, of which almost 80 billion of that goes through EMS. It's important to all of us. So
Yeah.
AUSA was really, really interesting, right? You have 750 vendors, 44,000 people attended the show this year. I actually looked to see, I did 36,000 steps in 2 days. So it's a big event. And it's really interesting, right? Because I think you are, for the first time, starting to see some paradigm shifts in how that vertical market, the primes, the government, are realizing that we need to move faster and we need to be more nimble, which is kind of counterintuitive to how it's always been. So things that you are seeing and big trends. Yeah, I'll just start with some products. Drones. It might as well have been called the drone show in a lot of ways, whether it was actual UAVs, everything from full-size Sikorsky helicopters that, instead of having a cockpit, it's a open bay where you can put an ATV or unmanned vehicle in the front. I mean, they're sending full-size helicopters out unmanned at this point, down to the small drones. And then the other thing that's becoming important is, on the flip side, the counter drone systems, right? How to monitor, how to shut down, how to do threat detection. So drones was absolutely a huge one. Artificial intelligence, which I'm sure we'll talk about in greater scope because it's obviously a buzzword in the industry right now, but AI becoming huge, especially on the edge, right? When you can deploy systems, basically data centers in the field, that are taking all of these different sensor inputs, whether it's cameras or radar or LiDAR or pure data, radio communications, and you have a system that's consolidating all of that quickly and helping make decisions. Huge trends across that. I think, software-defined radios are still a huge thing. But what becoming more important is software-defined everything, where, again, going back to data center, edge, drones, where you can quickly do a software update to a piece of equipment and change how it acts or how soldiers interface with it in the field based on different conditions. So, things that I just see was nimble and fast. And there's companies like Anduril,
Mhm.
who was started by the guy that founded Oculus, Palmer Luckey, and it's interesting. They've kind of turned the industry on its head, where it used to be get a big Prime would get a big contract. They'd spend years in development, and by the time they release something, you're on the verge of obsolescence, both from a component standpoint and from a technology standpoint. You have a company like Anduril, who in 8 months came out with a very cool drone application, and it's just proving that we can be fast, we can be nimble, and with Moore's law, the technology is there to support it. So it was really interesting.
Yeah. You make a good point there. And when you're talking about AI on the edge being critical, because you, you can't put it in the cloud because it has to be so damn fast. It's got to be like
Yes,
that and responsive that you can't, that ping time probably could cost lives.
it does. And the other thing that's interesting, you look at the communication. So you've got guys, the big guys like L3 Harris doing radios out of Rochester. Then you've guys like Persistent Systems out of New York, and all these different companies. They all operate on different platforms. And what's unique, one of the investments we made, and the reason we recently hired Josh DeHoe, who is joining my team in business development. He's a retired master sergeant from the Air Force. And he's helping drive our integration into these A&D customers. But it was cool to be at the show with him because he's used a lot of these things in real life, right? And we talk about things where he'll deploy onto the front lines via the Air Force on one radio protocol, and they're doing a joint operation with Rangers or the Marines or the Army, and they're on a different radio protocol, right? So it's it's interesting to see, but I think it's the compartmentalization that each of these different entities within our government and the armed services, they kind of spin their own way. Well, it becomes important in this world where traditional warfare, and we're seeing it with Ukraine, it's less human to human interaction and more machine to machine. And then cybersecurity becomes so, having the ability to quickly switch, radio frequencies, if you need to see what a predator drone that the Marines are using, and you're part of the Air Force, how do you access that information? And to your point, you have to do it live, you have to do it real time, and you have to do it local. So it's just interesting to see. So, along with that, you're seeing a lot of battery companies, which is kind of interesting, right? How do you power all these things? How do you keep them safe? So I think it's really interesting, and it is of importance with everything that's going on in the world right now. I mean, just back to our industry, whether it's trade wars or real conflict, there's challenges that we're all facing, and staying ahead of that's good. And it's going to continue to grow. They have 7.5% is the expected CAGR for that industry through 2033. So there's going to be more, and things that were important are becoming less important. And I'll talk just to the supply chain, right? When you look at EMS partners, there still will be things like sonar buoys where they want to have stockpiles of that, right? Missiles. But other things, right? I can see with drones, I can see with drone counter surveillance, with some of these edge AIs as things change. They want to move faster. So I think we'll continue to see trends for EMS doing higher mix, lower volume, very complex builds as opposed to these long programs. And where does that cause challenges? The supply chain in the 17 years that I've been in the industry has changed drastically. I use the example when I moved to Aero or to Florida with Aero in 2017. We had 7 implant stores in the state. By the time I left, we had none left at contract manufacturers because the business model changed. Everything went to lowest cost, just in time. They wanted parts 3 seconds before you could put it on the machine. And that works when you have really good consistency and very good forecast and visibilities moving forward. But I think one of the trends that could throw us all through a loop is the military wants to move faster. They want to be able to flip a switch and say, I need 10,000 drones in 8 weeks. And no, I can't wait 26-week lead time. So things that we heard the Army talk about at AUSA was kind of taking a hot, warm, cold look at supply chain. What are the hot items that you want teed up at all times? You want to know that when you need to hit a switch, they're readily available for you. So front end supply chain, holding inventory, doing safety stock programs, bonded inventory, and then kind of migrating through. The industry in itself, or in distribution, has kind of changed to that, the old Toyota just-in-time model. I think we're going to have to start pivoting back to more inventory-centric partners who are willing to take some risk on the front side, hold inventory, put programs in place that protect the supply chain long-term, so that we're not constantly in this cycle of, hurry up to slow down, if that makes sense. And that's
Yeah.
what freedom's built for, honestly.
Yeah, and that's, as I hear you speaking, that's what came to mind. In that kind of environment, you have to hold more inventory for them.
You do.
It's
You
just,
do. And it's interesting, right? I laugh. It seems like it should be easy to do, but I use the example all the time. You look at an FPGA family from Xilinx or Altera or Lattice. Yeah, if you look at the prefix of that part, the family, it's like, oh, it's just one family. Well, there's 100 different flavors, there's different packaging, there's different memory densities, there's different temperature ranges. So it really has, the suppliers themselves have built we have the perfect part for your right application, which makes it difficult because at Aero, what they call D-class items is, it's less than 2 customers drive 80% of the demand. That's most of the semiconductor material, right? Because it is so specialized. So it becomes hard to do that. And it takes true communication and collaboration to make that happen.
and there's also obviously increased risk. I remember years
There
ago,
is.
military was always, EMS loved it, but the problem is programs could end with a phone call, right? All of a sudden,
Yes.
stop. And then if it's like, well, what do you mean stop? We have all this, right? And so what do you do with that? But it seems like, unfortunately, for the world, but fortunate for the industry, with this constant war footing and everything that's going on, there's much more stability. I don't know what the right word is within the military electronics these days than there was historically.
There is stability, but there's demand, what I'll call demand stability, but there also sometimes it's a worst enemy, right? So as a DLA certified independent distributor, right? We bid directly on Defense Logistic Agency site every day on parts, and it's obsolete material. I mean, we're quoting things that went obsolete. We quoted one that went obsolete in 1998, but is still critical for our infrastructure. So you have that, right? And that's one of the many pillars that we can support to keep their operations up and running. But then you look at it, broader spectrum, and some of the stuff that's going on with the trade war in China in particular, right? You look at things like rare earth minerals. They are the world's leader in most of the critical rare earth minerals. So that can become a national security risk, right? And I think that these are things that you hear at the show is, again, the conversation has pivoted from the right part to, yes, we need the right part, but where is it coming from? What's inside of it? What's the risk profile of the raw materials? Because it literally takes, China or other countries saying, we're not going to export XYZ rare earth mineral to your facilities anymore, and it becomes a huge issue. So again, these are things that it's beyond the scope of what a lot of us do, right? We're unfortunately trusting those in leadership to help navigate those channels, but they're things that we have to keep in mind because it will have far-reaching impacts if anything drastic were ever to happen. And that's really what I got out of AUSA is electronics has always been a critical component of our national defense and how we protect our borders. And now it's how do we continue as the world changes? How do we navigate that more efficiently to protect all parties involved. So it was really interesting, and there are some incredibly cool companies that you see at the show, and just it is. I kept sending pictures. I have a 12-year-old son. I kept sending pictures to him of different things, and he's like, "I want to go with you next year," because it is really neat. But and again, we go to these shows, yes, to network with customers and try and develop relationships, but a lot of it too is to see the front end trends, to determine things that we could be doing as a small mid-sized privately held company that's very nimble, right? And one of the things that I'll just highlight that's interesting, I actually brought a little show and tell. We've partnered with a company called JCon Systems in Orlando. They manufacture drone motors in India. We're working with them to onshore drone motor manufacturing. So what's interesting about drones in particular is T Motors out of China has 85% share of the drone motor space. There's very little drone motor production in North America. So when you talk about risk factors, that's a risk factor. So I think you're going to see more and more stuff like that. And because we are nimble and because we are customer focused, this is a partnership that we looked at and we said, hey, this makes sense with your quality and expertise in the electronics and ours with touching customers. We've seen a lot of momentum build on these kinds of things. So, adding of Josh as an aerospace and defense business development person, onboarding vendors like JCon Systems, we're trying to help these A&D customers and our EMS partners build out an ecosystem that they may not get through traditional distribution channels.
Okay, very good. Listen, I mean, we could keep talking about AD, but let's move into some other sectors. Well, do you notice any noteworthy trends in the other verticals you support?
Right now, it's interesting. We're probably as close to an allocation market as we've been for some specific commodities since middle of 23. Memory is a challenge right now, especially in DDR4. Hynix, Micron, and Samsung are all pivoting to DDR5. Anything that basically has used an FPGA over the past 3 to 5 years has some form of DDR4. So that's causing a little bit of challenge because it's not a drop-in replacement. There is some firmware, software, hardware, navigation that's necessary. So that's putting a little bit of pressure on the market. The stuff that's happening with Nexperia right now definitely has created a little bit of a vacuum in that space. We're seeing a tremendous amount of demand for that. But overall, we're still kind of what feels like this wait and see moment. I don't think any of us feel like the economy is doing as well as the stock market would intimate that it is doing. And there's just so much uncertainty on where we are headed. We're definitely seeing things pick up. We're definitely seeing the market get stronger. We're investing here on the front side of that to be able to support what we see in 2026. But we talk about it all the time. You're one news report, one world event away from that getting flipped on its head. And I think that's the interesting thing, Eric, and it creates risk for all of us. Certainty helps us plan, all of us plan for the future. When you have overwhelming financial metrics that show that the economy is doing well, but you have customers that are still burning off some inventory, still trying to hold on to cash because interest rates are still high. They're trying to hold on to cash reserves, so not having to borrow money. It's interesting. So I don't know. I think if nothing else changes, I think 2026 will be a strong year. I think we'll continue to see lead times and pricing issues. We're already starting to see some of that on the front end. But what I talk to customers about a lot, understanding that we are a niche in their overall fabric of their supply chain, right? Franchise distribution is incredibly important. The supplier relationships are incredibly important. But what can we do to help protect your business, whether it be safety stock programs and back to even the military? Are there key components that if the pricing went up significantly or decommits started to happen again, that would put your business at risk? We're trying to find those pockets to help protect the customer's long-term business goals. So we're all kind of waiting to see what's going to happen, honestly.
Yeah. And that's always the challenge, right? Within the industry, when things slow down, what happens when they ramp up and how quickly can you ramp? And I think I like to think that the industry has learned from the previous slowdowns, right? We're not shutting down all the machines, which, it's like an SMT machine. People forget. It's not like you just hit the switch and it's running perfectly again.
Right.
It's been shut down for a week or two. It's going to take a bit, right? So
Yep.
it's not an immediate reaction. So I mean, the same with the supply chain then and the component availability.
Yeah. So when you talk about vertical markets, I don't, outside of aerospace and defense, which continues to be strong for everyone, your AI certainly is a huge buzzword right now. So we're seeing a lot in data center, energy storage, energy manufacture, because that listen, that's a whole different story, but our current electrical grid is not built to support the amount of data that we are generating and analyzing every day. So, I'm not sure. Yeah, it's interesting. You hear people have started talking recently about AI bubble, right? Michael Burry, the guy that predicted the big short in the real estate market, I read yesterday, he shorted both Nvidia and Palantir stock by $1 billion each because he sees a crash coming, right? Where it has been overhyped to a point. Now, does that mean that AI is going away? No, it doesn't. But how does that affect the supply chain when you have, especially the memory, the GPU guys that are scaling for this? If it does start to slow down, how does that affect the rest of the market in a multitude of ways, right? Does product suddenly become more readily available in memory because it's not going so much to other, what happens to price points? So I think AI is the interesting one right now. We talk about it internally every single day. We're trying to find the right ways to use it to drive efficiencies and effectiveness. And I love Peter Diamandis did a podcast, and Ed Milet, who was the podcast host, asked him a question. He said, how will AI affect companies moving forward? And he had a very straightforward answer. He goes, there will be two types of companies. There will be those that use AI and those that are out of business, right? So it's here to stay. It's going to be leveraged somehow, but there's some question on, how sustainable is it at its current scope? And that is one for sure that has definitely popped up as hot. It feels like medical is still pretty soft coming out of the COVID days. Industrial still pretty stable. Lighting's still pretty stable. Automotive's going through a lot of challenges with Nexperia right now. They're used everywhere. So they're definitely ramping. It feels like their demand. Now, how much of that is artificial based on current, trends with Nexperia, we'll see long term, but it feels like we're still kind of in that wait and see mode.
Right. And within all that, you indicated too that 2026, there's a lot of optimism for it currently.
There is.
And I hear that, I see from the EMS companies, you see the results, you see the trends there, revenues are down, obviously that impacts a lot of things on their end, but then you also hear that their forecast and what they're talking about, what their books are showing for next year is generally upward. So
we do a lot with EMS, and I have yet to be on a call in the last 6 months where an EMS has been like, things are just okay. Everyone's cooking right now, which is a good sign.
Yeah, no. It's we're hopeful for next year, having gone through this year. So you make me very, I like your 12-year-old son. I wanted to go to the A next year. I know people who've been there, and I've been intrigued over the years, but it sounds like that would be a fun one to attend. So
I would highly recommend it. One, it's funny. It's the first time I've been to DC, and last time I was there was my 8th grade trip, which I won't even tell you how long ago that was. But it's it is such a beautiful area. There's so much history. And then you kind of get a little more myopic and you're going in and seeing the backbone of what has helped make this, what I think is the greatest country on earth. It was just really neat to see, and just the innovation, right? It's interesting, and Josh has been multiple times over the years, and that was one of his big takeaways. Is it used to be about things that went boom and made loud noises. It's not that way anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Before we end, I do want to point out to the audience that this is Andy Barnett speaking. You'll see on the screen that it says Buccaneers conference room for him.
That's true.
That's not his name. That just happens to be where he resides here today, down in their offices there in the Tampa area. So, Andy, I appreciate your insights. This has been excellent. We got to do this again. You're a great, you bring a lot of energy and a lot of insight on what's happening in the industry.
Well, it is fun, and I was laughing with someone just recently. I've led sales teams for a long time now, and there's always stress and pressure in sales. And I used to tell people, like, look, we're not saving lives, and I used to say that, and then it hit me one day. It's interesting, right? What we do, whether you're designing, building as an EMS, or supplying parts, when you go to a show like AUSA, or you visit a medical customer that's coming up with some kind of revolutionary diagnostic or cure treatment for something, it does make you realize that what we do every day is important. You're anyone who's watching your podcasts and your episodes, we're all part of an ecosystem that helps not only sustain what we have, but build a better world. And I love it, man. I take it very seriously. I take enjoyment in talking about the industry, and I'm really excited to see what's going to come, right? I think AI is going to have unbelievable, far-reaching impact on the quality of life, and it takes electronics to make that stuff happen, and at Freedom, we're here to support that, right? We're here to be a nimble partner. We really want to understand what our customers' challenges are, and give them options. One thing that I talk about, and listen, the independent space has always had a little bit of a stigma. I spent 16 years trying to sell against it. I've been on this side of the fence for a year, and it has become very apparent to me the importance that we play in the ecosystem. And it comes down to being creative and being nimble and really listening to our customers' challenges and putting things in place that protect them long term, right? We're not here to change the way they do things. We're here to supplement it. So, my conversation with every customer is, hey, if you're not considering what we can do, the data we provide, you're leaving options on the table, and options are never a bad thing. So
Yep.
we're here to keep doing that. We're here to stay on the cutting edge. We're here to help drive, what the industry needs, and find pockets, and, hope to be a great partner to a lot of customers out there.
Excellent. Well said. Well said. For people listening, if they want to get in touch with Andy, please reach out on LinkedIn. He's very easy to find there. That's usually the best method I always point people to.
Absolutely.
And do reach out. Obviously, he's very approachable and very knowledgeable. So take advantage of that. Andy, I appreciate your time. Let's do this again, probably in the new year. And
Sounds good.
I wish you happy holidays heading into the season we're about to.
Same to you, my friend. Always good to talk to you, Eric.
Take care. Thank you.
Thanks.